Hi everyone, this is Ignorance and Bliss. I'm Hodan.
I'm Farah.
I'm Lisa.
And today we're talking about social mobility. So, Farah, social mobility, what do you understand by the term?
So social mobility is the change in someone's social status. So you have vertical social mobility, which is going up and down the social strata, and then you have horizontal social mobility. So that's you staying in the same position, but you're changing location. So for example, we're all head of departments. Yeah. If we change school but stay in the same position, that's horizontal social mobility. Whereas if we change position, that could be up or downward social mobility.
And you could move, downward social mobility might happen because you were married to somebody who had money, for instance, and you've lost that. So it doesn't always happen through occupation.
Absolutely.
But generally speaking, that, or for example, it can happen the other way, where you come into lots of money through inheritance. So it's not always occupational related, but that's the most common.
To me, social mobility is about your starting point in life and where you get to. I think it's this idea that wherever you start off, we want to increase social mobility in the world, right?
Yeah.
For especially those that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's saying that wherever you start in life, you should be able to access the same opportunities as somebody that is from a more advantaged background.
Yeah. So that's the idea of meritocracy, that we live in a meritocratic society where you earn your job based on your merit and based on your talents.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
No, I think that obviously, that in theory, that sounds fantastic. And I think that there is an element of meritocracy in UK society, because I think the fact that we have state schools, which are free for everybody, in theory, everyone's being taught by the same teachers. They've got the same curriculum. In theory, that sounds as though meritocracy is, alive and kicking. But actually, I think I have a personal problem with that, and there's been lots of research about the myth of meritocracy because it's problematic. There are students who come into education and they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. These are students who are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, but also they're materially deprived. Parents lack economic capital, symbolic capital, cultural capital, and I think for those reasons, I've got an issue with everybody getting what they deserve. I don't think everyone gets what they deserve.
Absolutely.
I think that there is a step in that direction in theory. I think in practice it's completely different, and as teachers I think we can all say that especially in the UK, that there are definitely disadvantaged students who the education system does not pull through in the same way as middle class students.
Yeah, if we look at ascribed status, so the fact is that you're born with your ethnicity, your nationality, your religion to a certain degree, whether or not you have a physical disability or any disability, that's going to impact your life chances.
Absolutely.
Because you're born into a social class and an ethnicity, etc. And that's going to impact your life chances going forward, right?
Absolutely, and doubly disadvantaged as well.
Yeah.
So if you look at the stats, not only does it show working class students in schools generally achieve less, but it also shows ethnic minority students achieve less. So where you've got two of those going on at the same time, I think it's definitely the myth of meritocracy on that one.
So we're told, or we're taught by society, that to get on in life, to do well, is all about how hard you work.
Yeah.
So you guys are saying that that's not true.
I think to a certain degree it is true. I'm a huge advocate for social mobility and meritocracy. I do think to a certain degree there is some truth in that. But I think it's a very naive way of thinking if you just believe that we live in a meritocratic society. Because if you truly believe you live in a meritocratic society, you're also then saying people at the bottom deserve to be there because they did not take those opportunities that were given to them.
Absolutely.
So they deserve to be in that position, and I am where I am today because I deserve to be in my position. You're not acknowledging your privilege.
Yeah.
So yes, on the one hand, I do think meritocracy is alive and kicking, but also I think there are certain barriers that individuals have. Ethnicity, religion, gender, etc.
So as teachers, we all know what pupil premium is. That is something that in the UK especially, we talk about that a lot, and also we tend to know, depending on what school you're working in the UK, in the state sector anyway, how the percentage of your school population that are eligible for free school meals. Yeah, that's how we measure kind of which students are more disadvantaged, right? Compared to other students. And there's an interesting stat to say that of all the students that are eligible for free school meals in the UK, only 16% of them achieve 2 A levels.
Wow.
So not even a fifth of those students go on to achieve 2 A levels, because A levels really, like, in this day and age, we try and encourage everybody to do A levels.
Yeah.
A levels have this sort of kind of, they're seen as good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And other qualifications such as BTEC or other vocational pathways
academic.
aren't as valued.
Yeah.
They're seen as less academic. And for most universities, even though obviously it's changing and you can have BTEC qualifications and things like that, but really to access a kind of high-paying job in the UK, you have to go to university, don't you?
Yeah, I was going to say that also 3 A levels is what's generally needed. So if you think about the UCAS process, which is what most students in the UK go through, you need 3 A levels in order to be able to access most courses at university. BTECs can be accepted, but again, you need to do the equivalent of 3 A levels. So if they're only getting 2, I think that already poses a problem.
But the issue is, even with the kids and students that actually achieve those 3 A levels, they meet the entry requirements, they're not getting into these elite universities.
Absolutely.
They're not getting into Oxford, they're not getting into Cambridge. So I'll give an example. 7% of the UK's population, students, attend fee-paying schools. 7% attend fee-paying schools. The percentage of fee-paying students that end up in Oxford and Cambridge is between 30 and 40%.
Which is massively disproportionate.
Absolutely.
That shouldn't be the case, should it?
And if you go into that and you look at the schools that they give 40% of students that went to private schools that end up at Oxbridge, if you look at that, they're only coming from a handful of schools in the UK, a handful of private, or as we call it in the UK, public schools.
The Sutton Trust is an educational social mobility charity. It done some research actually in 2018 on how many students get access to Oxbridge. So it found that Oxbridge were recruiting students from 8 top UK schools in comparison to 3,000 state schools.
Right.
So if you're a student in these top UK schools, in these 8 schools, you've got a better chance at going to Oxbridge than 3,000 other state schools.
Isn't that a complete contradiction of meritocracy then?
Absolutely.
Because those 3,000 students in state schools may be working incredibly hard and they're not being noticed. It's like that old boys network where, you know, parents...
so socially exclusive.
Absolutely. That if you know somebody, you're more likely to be able to get into, private schools, you're more likely to be able to get into certain institutions. And we know that working class students may not have those connections.
They definitely don't.
Definitely don't have those connections.
The individual, Michael Young, that coined the term meritocracy, he got his son into Oxford by calling the university. So, for example, his son Toby Young, he didn't meet the requirements. The requirements were 3 Bs. He got 2 Bs and a C. So he failed to meet the entry requirements at Oxford University. His dad, who coined the term meritocracy, done the complete opposite to meritocracy. He called the university and got his son into Oxford.
He knows him. Do you know anybody that works at Oxford University?
No, I don't.
No. Do you, Hoden?
No. As a teacher, I've come across I've come across teachers who've obviously, or people who are Oxford graduates, etc. But definitely not people.
But
that
he's
I know
a famous sociologist. Michael Young is a very famous sociologist.
Absolutely.
So all he needs to do is call up the university, and off his son goes.
Yeah, because it's who you know.
Absolutely.
That's part of it as well.
Social capital, right?
And that's part of what private education buys you. Because when we talk about parents and what they're buying, when you're sending your child to a private school, I've got nothing against private schools, by the way. I know that people want to send their kids there. They feel like they might get a better education. So I'm not criticising, I'm just highlighting the fact that
we have inequality.
What are parents buying when they send their kids to a private school? Are they buying an education, or are they buying more than that?
That's a really good way of looking at it, because with that education also comes connections, opportunities that aren't available to students in state schools. 90% of failing schools, comprehensive schools, are in areas that are deprived. deprived of
they're
boroughs.
buying social capital and they're buying cultural capital.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're sending your child to a school where they're mixing with other people that are in the upper echelons of society, so that your child can then access those things after they've left, or you know.
Yeah.
But even if you think about industries, look at politics. How many politicians in the UK are from Oxbridge?
Yeah.
How many bankers?
Yeah.
Exactly. If we look at bankers, all these top professions, legal professions, it's all these Oxbridge graduates.
Yeah. In terms of social mobility, because I think meritocracy is tied to social mobility.
Yeah.
In terms of social mobility, then how easy is it to become upwards socially mobile? I think that's a myth as well, because if it's not based on merit, it's really difficult to get up there.
I think we're taught that in order to have a just and fair society, social mobility is alive and kicking.
Yeah.
And it's the cornerstone of every society, right? To a certain degree, yes, we do have social mobility, but I'm not entirely convinced.
So there's this Somali author actually called Hashim Mohammed. He didn't start life as an author. He started life in Somalia, moved to the UK as a refugee from the Civil War, and now is a barrister, Oxford graduate, and he has a book called People Like Us, when he touches on social mobility and whether or not it's a myth. Yeah. And he recognises that he's made it. He's a lawyer, he's a barrister himself, he's part of the bar. He's going to events where you're having to wear gowns and things that he never thought he'd be able to do. He recognises that it's not just because he worked hard. He went to Wembley High School. Yeah. It's because he adapted himself so that he would be able to fit in and access these different kind of groups in society. And he talks, and this is the advice he gives to young people, and I'd be interested to hear what you girls think of it. So he says that you can make it, but you have to change yourself. You have to adapt.
I think that's really interesting, hearing that, and I also think that not everybody knows how to adapt.
Yeah.
That's not something we teach in school. And
but why
should that be? I was going to say,
adapt?
should that even be a prerequisite? Because adapting says that something's wrong with you, and if we're saying it's based on hard work and merit, then everybody should get what they deserve, regardless of having to be adapt.
So by adapting, is he trying to say you change your hobbies,
he's
your
talking
personality?
He's talking about code switching.
Okay.
So he's talking about
elaborate versus restricted codes.
Yeah. So he's talking about when you're in your community, the one you regard as your home community, and you're talking to your peers, you act in a certain way, you speak in a certain way, your accent might be different, the music you listen to, the things you're interested in. But then when you're, obviously he went to Oxford, when you're mixing with those people, you have to change the way you speak, and just so you kind of get your foot in the door. This is what he touches on. So he's not saying kind of
play the system is what he's saying.
That's what he's saying.
Play the system,
he's
work the
saying
system.
You have to play the game.
But that honestly brings me to schooling, because we're teachers, right? About how certain parents, middle class parents, know how to play the system or work the system, and as a result of that, their children have a much more positive experience in school. They know how to challenge teachers and the school system when it comes to exclusions, when it comes to behaviour management, when it comes to providing opportunities. A lot of working class students whose parents aren't professionals don't know how to do that, and I think that's where that inequality comes from. I think inequality is rife in comprehensive schools. Yes, in 1965 the government brought about comprehensivisation, and it was supposed to get rid of the tripartite system, but I don't think it's necessarily gotten rid of inequality in schools.
The other thing that I was reading about is about the Social Mobility Commission. So they're this commission in the UK that they write a State of the Nation report based on the research they've done on social mobility in the UK, and then they advise the government on what to do. And in their latest report from 2019, they mentioned something very interesting that I think might affect us. They mentioned the fact that the UK are losing so many of their professionals because you are priced out of where you live. And for me, that really resonated with me because that's the reason I moved here. Yeah? I'm from London. I was earning a decent salary as a teacher in London, but I wasn't earning enough to be able to save properly to get my own property.
Absolutely.
So in the city where I grew up, I couldn't afford to own my own property there because my parents don't have money to give me towards a deposit. So what I would have had to do is really kind of have a stripped down lifestyle, really sacrifice I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's very difficult. I would have had to really have a stripped down life to really kind of save any significant amount of money to be able to save a deposit. So that's why I moved here.
And someone else might have had from a different class background, would have had a completely different experience. Maybe their parents would have put the deposit down, or maybe because of the fact that they got into certain universities or whatever, certain jobs, positions, because of who they are, they would have not had to have that same problem. And that's an inequality and unfairness in itself. And that means that social mobility is not accessible to everyone. So in terms of social mobility then, are there any instances that show that there has been some positive move in that direction? What do you guys think?
Well, according to the State of the Nation report by the Social Mobility Commission from last year, the 2018-2019 report, social mobility in the UK had been stagnant for the 4 years up to the report. So according to them, no.
But I do think that there are certain individuals that have recognised inequality in society. So I remember in 2018, Stormzy introduced his scholarship scheme. So he created a scholarship for 2 black students. So he was going to fully fund their university degree. So this was at Cambridge University. So he done that in 2018. A year later, the amount of black students admitted in Cambridge University increased by 50%. Just over 200 students at Cambridge University. And the university called it the Stormzy effect. So I think there are definitely individuals that have recognised inequality in society.
And the lack of social mobility.
Absolutely, and they're trying to do something about it.
Is it his job to do that?
Absolutely not. But at the same time, I don't buy this whole, I've made it, I'm at the top, so therefore you need to work hard and you can make it to the top because I made it to the top. He clearly recognises that meritocracy is a myth, and there are barriers to individuals. Like I said earlier, in regards to ascribed status, your life chances are determined at birth. 100% they're determined at birth.
Because the Stormzy effect for me raises some questions. If Stormzy can do that and achieve that, then what does that say about government policies that haven't done as much? That, to me, that makes it seem as though it's theory that's not really going into practice, or it's tokenistic. Do you guys agree?
I think, to me, what it highlights is that even though governments know there are problems that exist, because we've always known this, these numbers have been reported on for years. It just goes to show that the government haven't done enough to sort this problem out and increase social mobility. So another report that came out in June this year in 2020 found that from the kind of state of the nation from 2013 to 14 that had suggested, so what they do, they suggest how we can improve social mobility in the UK, right? And it's up to the government to then put things in place to actually make change. So the report that came out in June as a follow-up found that government had acted on about not even a third of the advice that they were given. So it's like, so you know what to do, you know what to do, but you're not doing it.
But is that because if you look at those in charge, if you look at politicians and the Prime Minister, they come from a very socially exclusive club. So yes, we have issues in society, but it doesn't impact them, it doesn't bother them. That's why it's so important to have representation, right?
Absolutely, because representation means that people who care about it, like Stormzy, actually push for policies that help people like him or people from different, lower working class backgrounds, whatever. I definitely think it's important.
We have more, in terms of government and MPs, we definitely have more representation following the December election in the UK than we've had from minority groups. So BAME MPs, we now have the highest number of BAME MPs that we've ever had. Same thing for women.
Well, that's positive, of course.
It's positive, but we're still, like, in terms of women, I think there's something like 34% of MPs are women now. It's still not representative of the population because we make up 50% of the population, but it's more than we've had. And if we look at who's got the power, so we look at where are those women MPs, most of the women MPs are in the opposition parties. So in government, obviously we've got a Conservative government at the moment, and they've only got about, I think, 24% of Conservative MPs are female.
And Labour's got
51%.
So that's more representative of the UK society, isn't it?
Exactly.
I think in terms of working class students as well, the whole idea is that school is supposed to feed people into various sectors of society, and it should be done fairly. If class has nothing to do with it, we should see, a good proportionate number of people in lots of different, in cabinet, as CEOs, as barristers, whatever it might be. And the thing is, working class students leave school much earlier, as first opportunity generally, and a lot of that has to do with needing to make money. Absolutely. They come from families that aren't well off, and they help out in the household, and that in itself, so their decision there to leave school is impacting them negatively moving forward, and that's something that privileged students don't have to worry about. So I definitely think that's unfair, because one student is worried about deferring their gratification, making sure they've got the right qualifications, then they might go to med school for 7 years. Another student has to leave at the first opportunity to help out because they don't have that privilege.
That's why it's dangerous to say we live in a meritocratic society.
Absolutely.
And people are not taking these life opportunities.
Absolutely.
Because if you're working class and you need money right now, are you really going to get yourself in, £30,000 debt?
It seems
no,
really
you're going to
unfair.
Work straight away because you're going to earn money and you need to pay bills, etc.
And also, if you think about the language of the classroom, the language of textbooks, a lot of working class students don't come from parents who are in professional backgrounds, so may not actually be able to access the curriculum, which sounds crazy, but there is a difference between a standard English, standard Southern English, and a difference between the restricted code that's very colloquial. And we know that students are expected to write in exams in ways that make them, kind of articulate themselves in the way that you might see a newscast reader do so, or and not all students can do that. Doesn't mean they're not intelligent.
But it's that social and cultural capital that we were talking about earlier. How many working class students know a lawyer or a politician or somebody that is a CEO or somebody that owns their own business? How many of them actually know this?
But even if you look at schools, right, if you look at Eton's connections, I'm not just picking on Eton, I'm talking about private schools in general, but if we look at Eton, teachers in Eton, that establishment has connection. They know exactly how the Oxbridge interview process, recruitment process
they have mock interviews for students.
And also private primary schools, they will tutor students to pass 11+.
Absolutely.
If you go to a state primary school, you don't have that privilege.
Absolutely.
If you go to a standard comprehensive school, you're not taught exactly how an Oxbridge process works. So already you're on a back foot.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all teachers. So think about your experience at school, kind of going all the way back, because I come from a working class background, even though we might be considered middle class now by profession and by salary. I do remember feeling disadvantaged, and I remember looking at sets in school and looking at the lower sets and seeing a lot of people who look like me, students who look like me, a lot of students who are from poor working class backgrounds, and I think it's unfair to say even teachers themselves may actually have an unconscious bias.
Absolutely.
May negatively label students from certain ethnic backgrounds, also from certain social classes, and teachers have a lot of power. We know that now as teachers. We have a lot of power in deciding what sex students go into. I mean, we don't pull it out of thin air, but the point is you can choose to, a student on that borderline, you can choose to either put them here or here. And so I do think they're battling against that as well. We know that black boys are 7 times more likely to be excluded in schools. We know that working classes are, generally speaking, 5 times more likely. There's a lot of issues, I think, that come with different ethnic groups and classes in school.
And in terms of teaching as well, and about expectations that teachers have of students, we know that generally teachers have lower expectations of ethnic minorities, black and ethnic minority students, and working class students. We generally, that is the attitude, isn't it? Also, we know that black students tend to be predicted lower grades than they actually end up getting.
Absolutely.
Which for me, that's why I was so, with the whole coronavirus and us as teachers having to give our students grades, I was so kind of aware of the fact that there are going to be groups of people that are massively disadvantaged by that decision.
And that's not to say that as teachers we don't take our job seriously, but we know about implicit bias and unconscious bias. You're absolutely right, because if those figures show that what they achieve and what they're being predicted is different, then what's going to happen in terms of awarded grades when we've been given complete reign?
Yeah, absolutely. And those decisions that have been made by teachers are going to have a real life effect on the students. They're going to have a real life effect on what A-levels they can do.
Absolutely. What courses they can get into.
Exactly.
And also what universities they can get into.
Absolutely. So what are we saying then, girls? Are we saying that it's all bad? Because as teachers, what message are we sending to our students?
I'm a massive advocate of meritocracy and social mobility. So the advice I always give to young people and people in general is get yourself a qualification. Get yourself qualification, get yourself a degree, etc. So I 100% believe that. I think education empowers people, for sure. But at the same time, individuals need to understand that there are barriers. So for example, let's say you want to be a barrister, right? There are steps that you need to take. You need to get into a university that is ranked quite highly for law. Okay, we know you can't really get into Oxbridge if you're an ethnic minority, or you're less likely to get into Oxbridge. You then need to get yourself into a pupillage. You need that social network to get yourself into a pupillage. So there are barriers that we need to recognise.
I think in the classroom it's about, like you said, letting students know that they can achieve. And really, we're not saying don't, because then we're not encouraging fatalism, because the opposite would be, you're not going to make it, don't try.
Just give up.
Absolutely, don't give up, try really hard, but also equipping them with the knowledge to say, you are going to face barriers. You are going to probably find it harder, and it shouldn't be that way, but it probably will be, and develop resilience in the classroom so that they are feeling empowered to take on the challenge, I think.
And I think that will help with mental well-being as well, because I feel like it's us telling the truth to our students.
Absolutely.
We're telling them to work as hard as you possibly can, because getting these qualifications will open doors for you, without a doubt. Doors will be open, but be aware of some of the barriers that you might face that other people don't have to kind of break down.
Absolutely.
So I think it's giving them a bit of reality, so that when they do go to the job interview and they feel like, oh my gosh, I actually did all I could in that job interview, what was wrong with me, to have the awareness to be like, okay, perhaps this is the reason, and not to kind of think that in every instance, but just be aware that that is an inequality you might face in your life.
Guys, honestly, I was just thinking about this the other day. As a teacher, what I know about the school system now is very different to what I knew as a student. And I think the students are getting more savvy, but that's a different topic. But generally, I can play the system a lot better as a teacher now, and with my kids, future kids, if they get into school, than I would have been, or my parents were able to do. I think
that's because you're equipped, you're equipped with the knowledge now.
Absolutely, and I think that would be something that is definitely a privilege for my kids, because I know how the school system works back to front.
And that's another kind of knowledge that as teachers and individuals we are giving to our students, because we don't teach them at school that actually you might face a lot of inequality in life, but that is part of our personality and what we bring to the classroom.
And it's good for them to see us, I think, because that relatability means that they can see themselves in people who are in front of them. And I think that in itself is a life lesson.
Yeah. For all the students that we teach.
Yeah. Guys, we'd love to hear your comments. So let us know, what do you think about social mobility? What do you think about meritocracy? Is it a myth? Let us know.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. So we've got some stats for you on social mobility. I'm just going to read them out. So in the UK, only 6% of doctors, 12% of journalists, 12% of chief executives come from a working class background. A low ability child from a high earning background is 35% more likely to be a high earner than a high ability child from a low earning background. A third of the population come from working class backgrounds, but only 10% of working class people end up making it into elite occupations. Of these 10%, the ones that make it to these elite occupations, they tend to make less money than those from more privileged backgrounds. The top professions in the UK remain disproportionately populated by alumni of private schools, 67% of top judiciary, 59% of civil service secretaries, 29% of MPs attended private schools, despite only 7% of the population having received this kind of education. Only 7% of the school-age population attends fee-paying schools, yet typically between 30 and 40% of Oxbridge undergraduates come from the private sector. Black and minority ethnic people make up about 10% of the UK population, and now they actually make up 10% of the MPs. There are 65 BAME MPs in the UK, and 41 of them are in the Labour Party. In business, only 3% of FTSE 100 CEOs are from black and ethnic minority backgrounds.